The graveyard of empires tells us the future of the world. Now, over the last week, the world has watched the most powerful military and nation withdraw in defeat from Afghanistan. After 20 years of war, yet few realize the historical importance of empires that have gone to war in Afghanistan over the millennia. So in this video, I'm going to break down what happened in the last week that shows us what lies ahead. I want to show you the hidden lessons that we see now that signify this massive shift in the world and the power balance shift that just happens. Now, if you care about your future and how to navigate in this fast changing world, then you need to understand this lesson. So let's go. All right, now we're jumping right into it to talk about the graveyard of empires. And what does this mean, this massive shift? Now, this is a continuation on the video that I did just a few days ago talking about the greatest financial experiment in history ending. Now, this is a continuation of that, so stay tuned. Now, I want to just say real quickly, there is a link in the description down below. I am hosting a live event where I'm going to dig deep into this, the ramifications of what this is, and most importantly, how we're going to survive this shift over the next several years in this next decade. It's a live event. It happens off of YouTube because it's a pretty long presentation. There's a link in the description. I hope to see you there. All right, let's jump right into it. So continuing on from the greatest financial experiment and the distortions that have been sent out like ripples all across the world. 50 years into that, if you haven't watched that video, go back and watch that video right here, the greatest financial experiment and its ending. But what we're talking about today is specifically one of those ripples that have gone out. And of course, we're talking about what has just happened in Afghanistan. Now, let's just look at Afghanistan from the numbers. I'm not going to go deep into the past and how it got started. I don't care to go into that. If you want me to go into that, leave me a comment down below and we'll maybe put that together. But basically the tally is, of course, 20 years. 20 years we've been in Afghanistan since 9/11, 2001. The United States has spent about $2.4 trillion on going to war there, and over 300,000 people have died in this war. That's the tally. That's it by the numbers, just to kind of summarize it. But back to the main point, which is this graveyard of empires. Now, you know that if you watch this channel, at least on a regular basis, I love to go into history and I love to pull the stories out of history because it gives us that historical narrative. And this one, not a lot of people have heard of, the graveyard of empires. So that is Afghanistan. There's long historical importance of that. Now, Afghanistan is a main land route. It's what may be considered a linchpin to Asia, in between Asia, Europe, and India. So it's a main area that connects all of that together. And throughout time right here, so through Iran, Central Asia, and India. So it's that linchpin that connects all that together. Now, throughout millennia, so several hundred years BC before Christ, we saw the Persians, Alexander the Great, famously, the Greeks, the Arabs, the Turks, the Mongols, Genghis Khan have all tried to go into Afghanistan and have all left defeated. And they haven't just left defeated, but it signified the end of their empires going on. We saw the British tried to take over Afghanistan, tried to occupy Afghanistan from 38 to 1842. That should be 1838 to 1842. And when they left, it signified the end of the empire and they crumbled. The Soviets tried to occupy Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. After they withdrew from Afghanistan, the Soviet Union collapsed 2 years later. And finally, that brings us to the United States, which is the longest occupation, as we said, about 20 years. And will it signify the end of the empire? Well, I think you already know the answer to that question, at least if you went back and watched that video. Now let's just keep digging in. All right, now, one of the things to understand about Afghanistan is that it's decentralized. That's one of the reasons why almost nobody can conquer it or occupy it, because it's decentralized. It's hard to kill. Now, when we went in, basically a little bit of history, I wasn't going to dig into it, but basically after 9/11, the Bush administration told the Taliban, told Afghanistan that, hey, you're harboring terrorists, and we want you to turn over Osama bin Laden to us. They said no, and the United States said, then we're going to come in and with war, and they said, fine, we're not going to turn him over, and they said, we're prepared to wait you out. Bring it, they said. Bring the best that you got and we'll wait you out. And that's exactly what happened. 20 years we've gone in there, they waited us out, and that's because they're decentralized. So as I said, Afghanistan has been this unconquerable nation, the graveyard of empires. And part of the reason is because there's too many tribes. So it's very tribal, and there's all these different tribes within that. And so to get all of them, there's no central authority to take over. You have to take over one by one by one by one by one. And we have this mountain range, the Hindu Kush mountain range, that runs right up the middle and across, and it basically divides it into different ecosystems, into diverse terrains. So we have freezing cold temperatures, we have the deserts, we have the rainy, we have the mountains, and we have all these areas that are very, very difficult. And the way they build a lot of the architecture, they build these like fortress, they're called kalquats, and so they're basically like little castles, and it makes it very, very hard. The key word being decentralized and hard to kill. Think about it like this, like if we were a superhero and you could be any power that you wanted, who would be the most powerful superhero? The one that could fly, or the one that got laser beams out of their eyes, or strong? Well, ultimately, the strongest superpower would be the one that you couldn't kill. They wouldn't need any other superpower. They just don't need to die. If they can't die, they could pick up the other weapons and use those. And that's kind of what happened with Afghanistan. Now I'm going to hold that point because we're going to go back to it at the end. Now, who is really the enemy here? I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. This is not my normal programming, so if you're new to the channel, bear with me. But who is the real enemy here? Now, in the United States, this was on the news the other day, in the United States, apparently, if you have opposition to being, having your business forcefully shut down, and you don't want to be, limited in society, you could be a potential terror threat. If you claim that maybe there was some wrongdoing, and I don't want to say the word on YouTube, but if you claim there was some sort of wrongdoing there, then you could be a terrorist. If you like religious holidays, if you like religion, you could be a terrorist. But who really are the terrorists? I mean, if you stand up for your beliefs, and this is the part that just gets me, and here's why I want to go a little bit of a rant. It's one thing to take these positions, but to go into the contradictions. And that's what I want to show you real quickly. The contradictions about that. So if I stand up for my beliefs, we're the enemy. What about the censorship? So we have YouTube and Facebook and Twitter censoring everybody. The active sitting president of the United States was censored and shut down, but yet the Taliban is free to post whatever they want. The Taliban is free to put all of their propaganda online. They're free to show people falling from the planes dying, but yet we're censoring regular people, the active sitting president. We have KYC, this is know your customer. So we have financial inclusion. So 2 billion adults around the world are not able to get access to the financial system because they don't have permission. KYC, know your customer. All the financial industry is under this AML, anti-money laundering, and KYC. So we talked about in a couple of videos the infrastructure bill that was put together and how they wanted to get the software in the cryptocurrency space to collect data in every point to know the customer. All that data gets put together, it gets hacked and released out there, it gets used against you, and everybody is restricted from using the financial system because your $100 or your $1,000 could potentially go towards terrorism. In the meantime, they're actively funding it over in Afghanistan. And then we have basically limited movement. Right now we're seeing it in New York, we're seeing it in San Francisco, limited movement if you fall within these classifications, but yet we're actively importing all these people into the country. Now, on top of that, again, right, this contradiction that we see, we have not only made the enemy within our own walls domestic terrorism, we are also arming the enemy on the outside. So for example, back to Facebook censoring everybody, WhatsApp censoring everybody, well, the Taliban is actively using it. They actually said that they used WhatsApp to organize everything. So we're censored over here from using it, but they can use it to overthrow governments. Biden went on the news right here about 2 months ago saying that if you think you need to have weapons to take on the government, then you're going to need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. So this is on gun control. Biden says he wants to come for the guns, and he says that if you think you need them, you're going to need F-15s and nuclear weapons. So let's just take yours, you don't need them. So one, Afghanistan sure didn't need F-15s or nuclears, and they fended off the greatest military in the history of the world. But they want to come and take yours. In the meantime, they want to take it away from you. In the meantime, the US left $800 billion in weapons for the Taliban to have. Black Hawk helicopters, drones, missiles, stockpiles of arms. So they want to take yours away, but they left them $800 billion. And then on top of it, they were paying them to even allow themselves to evacuate the embassy. The embassy is supposed to be a sovereign nation inside that. And we had to literally pay them. And again, remember, your $100 or your $1,000 in that bank account could be used for terrorism, but never mind, we're actually paying them, the terrorists. We saw under the Obama administration, they released the generals from Gitmo. Now they've withdrawn and given them $800 billion in weapons, and they've opened up the southern border to bring in as many as they want. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? CNN calls them mostly peaceful in a grip of irony. Goes over there as they're chanting death to America, and they say that they are mostly peaceful. Now you might be asking yourself why? Why is all this contradiction? Or maybe you're just noticing it for the first time and you're asking yourself why, or maybe you're asking, Mark, please tell us why. Why is it that people in the US are domestic terrorists because we want a religious holiday, but over there, real terrorists are getting money? You are limited in your financial transactions because your $100 or $1,000 could contribute to terrorism. Meanwhile, we literally gave them money. They want to take away your weapons, the Second Amendment rights per the Constitution in the United States, and threaten you with F-15s and nukes. Meanwhile, we're giving them $800 billion worth of our best weapons, Black Hawk helicopters, drones, rockets, etc. Why is this? Well, I don't know if I have the exact answer, but let's look at some of the data and see if that tells us. So maybe this wasn't actually a massive mess up. Maybe this wasn't a big problem. Maybe it's actually what they wanted. Now let's take a look at this. Now in this, $2.4 trillion was spent. Where was it spent? Who got the money? Maybe the military contractors? Maybe the military industrial complex that Eisenhower and Kennedy warned us about? They made trillions of dollars out of this. Is that what they wanted? The US leadership looks very weak. Biden, the president of the United States, went into hiding for days, wouldn't even show up in public and wouldn't address it. The vice president wouldn't come out. Generals couldn't come out. The leadership looks very weak. We couldn't even organize an evacuation of our own people, American citizens. As of today, at the time of this recording, they said that maybe 50, 60,000 Americans could be stuck there and not even be able to get out. The dollar and the economy are weakened. And who steps in as the beneficiary? China. Let's take a look at this for a second. So let me go back a little bit further back to history. Let's go back to the beginning of this in 2001. Now, when we went into Iraq, a lot of people said, oh, the US is just trying to go there for the oil, right? But we never got any oil. The United States never got any oil. Now, some people said, well, shoot, if we're going to go spend hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars to free them or whatever we're doing, we should at least get some oil to repay ourselves, right? So at the time in Iraq, they weren't even really getting their oil into market because under Saddam Hussein, they weren't organized enough, the markets weren't open enough, and they weren't really benefiting much from the oil that they had in Iraq. Well, the U.S. fixed that. They got they got Saddam Hussein out of office. They opened up, they protected the oil industry enough to start getting into market. And you would think that after all that money, after American citizens, my brothers and sisters and yours as well, many of them paid the ultimate price over there, you would think that maybe the United States would benefit. But no, that's not how it happened. If we go back into history, this is actually from the Iraqi Economist Network. We can see here that China is reaping the biggest benefits of the Iraq oil boom. All the way back then. We can see that Iraq has become one of the world's top oil producers. Iraq now became one of the top oil producers, and China is its biggest customer. The Chinese are the biggest beneficiary of this post-Saddam oil boom in Iraq, they said. That was an oil expert. Before the invasion, Iraq's oil industry was sputtering, largely walled off from the world. So his overthrow, Saddam Hussein's, always carried the promise of renewed access to the country's immense reserves of oil. Chinese state-owned companies seized the opportunity. We lost out. The United States lost out, said Michael, a former Defense Department official at the Bush administration who worked on Iraq oil policy. The Chinese had nothing to do with the war. They didn't do anything. They didn't spend any money. They didn't put their people in jeopardy. They had nothing to do with the war, but from an economic standpoint, they are benefiting from it. And our Fifth Fleet and our air forces are helping to assure their supply. Now, this was 20 years ago. Could that be something that we might be seeing again? This is per CNBC. This is as of today, at the time of this recording. China may align itself with the Taliban. China may align itself with the Taliban and try to exploit Afghanistan's rare earth metals. Rare earth metals. Let me tell you about this for a second. So what became pretty evident at the end of during the pandemic last year was that the United States is solely dependent on China for a lot of things, very important, critical things, including about 90% of antibiotics come from China. We also know that these rare earth metals also come from China. Now, what are rare earth metals? There are different metals that are used in electronics, like magnets, for example. The US couldn't even go to war against China without them because we need them for our guidance systems and our submarines and our missiles and rocket launchers, etc. Without access to those, how could we even go to war? Well, the United States doesn't mine any of those because, we got EPA and it's bad for the environment. So instead, we let China mine 90% of them for the world. Well, as it turns out, Afghanistan has about $3 trillion worth of rare earth elements. Now, you would think that after being there for 20 years and sacrificing the lives of our people to be there and spending $2.4 trillion, maybe we would get some of that $3 trillion, especially because it's in our national interest. We really, really need it. We don't have it. China does. But no, we don't get it. Who gets it? China is aligning itself. As we can see, they've already been over there long before the evacuation happens. We can see they're already there shaking hands. China's English tabloid, the Global Times, on Monday referred to the humiliation of the US in Afghanistan. The article also talked of China's interest in post-war reconstruction of Afghanistan. So the Chinese are there, giving them loans to rebuild the infrastructure and get the rare earth out of the ground. Now, where are they getting the loans? Oh, that's US dollars. Are you starting to see the bigger picture here? I hope so. Now, what I say is we just need to stop this game altogether. Now, as I said in the beginning, this is a continuation of the greatest financial experiment ever, which is breaking the gold standard and going into a fiat money. Without being able to create an endless amount of fake counterfeit money from thin air, none of this would have ever happened. If we were on a sound money system like we were on gold, where we weren't able to create money from thin air, we wouldn't have $2.4 trillion to go occupy Afghanistan. We would have never gone into Iraq. China would have never had those dollars to buy out the oil. We can sit here and we can talk about politics all day, but it's really a waste of our time because unless we take away the money printer, it's never going to end. That is the source of their power. So we want to stop the game. Without the fake endless money, it's impossible. Countries would go bankrupt. That's what used to happen before the money printer, before World War I. Countries would end the war because they ran out of money. They would go and get more gold from their people, and eventually they'd run out of gold. They would go bankrupt. And then there would actually be real consequences. Do you think anybody in the United States government will be held accountable? Will anybody say that you did a horrible job and you should be fired? Or maybe even worse, maybe criminal charges? Would anybody be held accountable? No. If we had a sound money again, this would never be attempted again. There would have been real world consequences. A nation would have gone bankrupt trying, and they wouldn't be a nation any longer. Real consequence wouldn't be done. Like I said, leaders would be held accountable. Now, the key piece that I wanted to come back to is this: decentralized technology and money is hard to kill. The Afghans warned Bush, we're not giving up Osama bin Laden. Come and get us. We're going to outlast you because we're decentralized. We're hard to kill. Decentralized technology and decentralized money is hard to kill. And that's why we will win. We will take away the money printer. We will stop the game. These endless wars will no longer continue because we have a decentralized money that cannot be taken over by the government and it cannot be killed. It's distributed just like Afghanistan. There's no central place to attack, no central place to take over. And that is what's going to end this. It's going to stop the game and will lead to prosperity. Now, let me know what you think. Have I lost my mind? Maybe I'm just a little bit mad. I got to tell you, for me to say I'm pretty disillusioned with the situation is saying something, because you hear with the videos that I talk about every week, but watching what's unfolded over the last couple days has put me into a whole another category. Let me know what you think. Do you see this as a big monumental shift? Is this going to be the graveyard of an empire? Will this signal the shift of that? Leave me a comment and let me know what you think down below. Now, as I said before, I am hosting a live event where I'm going to dig deep into this, continuation from the previous video into this, more specifically what we're going to be doing about this to protect ourselves, our families, our legacy in the future. There's a link in the description down below if you want to come check it out. Otherwise, like I said, leave me a comment, let me know. Do you think this is going to be the graveyard moment for us? Other than that, give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. I know it was controversial. I didn't say some nice things. Give me a thumbs down if you want, but at least leave me a comment and tell me why. That's what I got for you today. All right, to your success. I'm out.